Hello, my name is Brandon Enright, and this is a video tutorial on how to solve Eric Virgo's Astrominx. Now, on Gelatinbrain's Virtual Magic Polyhedra, the puzzle number for this is 2.2.3. And this looks like a very daunting puzzle. It looks quite confusing. However, it's actually the icosahedral shape mod of Gelatinbrain's 1.1.4, which is itself closely related to both the Pyramix crystal and the Starminx. So if you have seen my how to solve Gelatinbrain's 1.1.4 video, then this puzzle is essentially totally identical. The only difference is that the corners on the dodecahedron have orientation they don't here, and the centers on the dodecahedron don't have orientation and they do here. So this shape, like I said, is an icosahedron. It's a 20-sided solid. Each side is a triangle, and it has 12 vertices. And so these vertices are equivalent to the faces of a dodecahedron, and these centers of the icosahedron are equivalent to the corners of a dodecahedron. And so this shape is the dual of the dodecahedron. So before I start talking about how to solve this puzzle, let me go and actually show the relationship between this puzzle and 1.1.4. So on 1.1.4, if you should already be familiar with this. If you are not, go ahead and take a look at my how to solve the 1.1.4 puzzle. The solve order I suggest for this puzzle is that you solve all the Megaminx corners. So let me show, so to do a 3-cycle of the Megaminx corners, you could do something like this. And that will have 3-cycled that corner, that corner, and that corner. Actually, it's going clockwise. And then here's how to change the orientation of these corners. So okay, so that changed the orientation. So we rotated that corner and we left every other corner alone. And again, this is review. So, and then to move the Pyramix crystal edges / the Starminx edges around, you can do this simple 1-1 commutator. And then to change a Pyramix crystal edge orientation, you can do something like this, where you put the edge back in place backwards, or with the opposite orientation. And then you do that. So you do your X part, then you flip it over with the Y part, you undo X, you undo Y, and you will flip to two edge orientations. And then to 3-cycle the centers, you do something like this, and that will 3-cycle 3 centers. And then to finish off this puzzle with the Starminx points, you'll do something to the effect of this, and you will have 3-cycled 3 the white, purple, blue Starminx points. So that's all review. It's all covered in my previous videos. Those were all commutator sequences. So go ahead and take a look at those videos if anything that you just saw looked surprising or new. The issue now is that showing you how to change the orientation of the corners is not particularly helpful. The Megaminx / Pyramix crystal corners is not particularly helpful in that puzzle, because if you'll recall, the corners correspond to the centers of that puzzle, which they don't have any orientation, and the centers do have orientation because they correspond to the vertices, the corners of the icosahedral variant, the Astrominx. So when we cycle these centers, all we worried about was their position. We cycled them. We did not worry about their orientation. And when these pieces have orientation, we're going to have to worry about that too. And so how can we go about tackling the orientation of these pieces? Well, if you'll recall, when you isolate a piece, if we're able to take that piece out and change its orientation and put it back into place, then you can flip the orientation of two pieces like that. So we need to find something that works for the centers. So we need to find a way to isolate the centers. And we already know how to isolate the centers using this sequence, because this is how we built our 3-cycle. But so here we go. If we had moved the green center in there, to finish out our 3 cycle. So let me do that. So we move the green in there to finish out our 3 cycle. Let's take a look at what other options were available to us. So move that green in there. Notice now that this blue piece, like we can't really change the orientation as this light blue piece right now because it affects the green center and the blue center, you know, and stuff we want to use. But when we go and do this, notice now that we have pushed this blue center out in a way where we can rotate it around without affecting any important piece on this puzzle, and then bring it back. Okay, so what we did was we changed its orientation. You can't see that we changed it, but we took this blue piece, push it over here, we change its orientation a little bit, and we pull it back. Now, you can't actually tell on this puzzle because they don't have orientations visible. So it looks like we just cycled some Starminx points around. We don't really care about the Starminx points. We did change the orientation of the blue center and the light blue center, but you can't see it. So let me show you a puzzle where you can see, a dodecahedron where you can see the center orientations. And that is this is the super pentultimate. So this is the pentultimate, and you have centers, and these centers are totally equivalent to the Starminx centers. So let me show you that. Ignore the fact that they have a whole bunch of colors on them for a second. And move that back. And it's pretty hard to tell, but this was the white center, it's now the green center. This was the green center, it's now the white center. Or no, excuse me, it was the light blue center. And then this was the green center, and it's now the light blue center. So we actually 3 cycled in a counterclockwise fashion the centers of this puzzle. So green went there, white went there, light blue went there. Ignore these corners. I have not talked about the pentultimate yet. The reason I'm showing this to you is because these centers have visible orientations to them. So this is the white center, the light blue center, the green center, purple center, so on and so forth. But you can see the orientation of this piece. So when you turn it, you can rotate the orientation of that piece. And the blue that on this center corresponds to the blue face, purple corresponds to that face, that sort of thing. So this is how you can tell if the orientation of the center is correct. So now let's isolate this white piece down here. So again, it's the same sequence we've seen for a while, but instead of putting the green piece in there and finishing a permutation commutator, let's finish an orientation commutator. So we're going to rotate this white piece counterclockwise 1 turn, and we're going to bring it back. Now, so that was our Y part. Our Y part, push it down, rotate it, bring it back. So that's our Y part. Now let's undo our X part. Okay, now we need to undo our white parts, which means we need to push this light blue down. We need to rotate it clockwise instead of counterclockwise and bring it back up, so that, you know, we're undoing it. Now, we didn't actually cycle any centers on this puzzle at all, and ignore the fact that we broke some corners. We're not worried about them on this puzzle. Notice that we rotated this center counterclockwise by 1/4 turn, 5th turn. So the purple that was pointing there is now, you know, rotated. It's pointing towards the blue face. And then we rotated the light blue center. We rotated it 1/5 clockwise, so that the white marker that was pointed up here is now pointed towards the green. So this is the exact same principle that I demoed on the Megaminx, where you isolate a piece, you change its orientation, you undo the isolation, and then you undo the orientation change. Okay, yeah, so we have to do this. No, okay, I completely screwed that up. Let's do that again. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. So it's the exact same principle where we isolate a piece, change its orientation, undo the isolation, undo the orientation change, and we'll change the orientation of 2 pieces. Only we applied it to centers instead of corners. So now let's actually switch back over to the Astrominx, the icosahedral shape mod, the 2.2.3 puzzle. And what are these pieces? So the corners of the 1.1.4, so the corners of the sort of the Starminx hybrid piece are right there. And then the centers are right here. So the centers are now the corners, and the corners are now the centers. And then the Starminx points are these 5 pieces around each one of the centers. So this piece, this piece, this piece, this piece, and this piece around each one of the centers. So those are the Starminx points. And the Pyramix crystal edges are these pieces right here. So the recommended solve order for the 1.1.4 puzzle is corners, and so these are the corners. So you would actually solve the centers on this puzzle first. And then you would use the 1-1 commutator to solve the Pyramix crystal edges, so these pieces right here. And instead of them looking like they're all part of one face, if you imagine that this piece right here, if you imagine that that is the face of a dodecahedron, then you can see how these would correspond to the edges. But it's a little bit hard to see on this puzzle. So you could undo that commutator by just doing it opposite. And all we did was to 3-cycle these edges. And yes, we did also 3-cycle the centers and the Starminx points, but again, that's not a particularly important thing. And then finally, so before you go to the Starminx point solving phase, so let me show that. Before you go to this phase where you solve the Starminx points, and then, oh, okay, I messed that up. Okay, so down 2, down 1, up 2, down 2, up 1, up 2. Okay, so before we go and solve these Starminx points, the green, the blue, and the teal piece, we need to first fix the orientation of all of these centers on this puzzle. And so that's where our isolating a center comes in. So here we go. So we isolated the center. And if we wanted to do a 3-cycle, we'd put that piece there, and then we'd undo our isolation. We'd undo the X part, and then we'd undo the Y part, and we would have done a 3-cycle of these centers. So we would use this 3-cycle to solve all the centers on the puzzle, and then we would worry about the orientation of these pieces. And so again, to change the orientation of these pieces, we would isolate a piece, so that piece is isolated, but instead of trying to do a 3-cycle, because we pushed this piece out of the, because we push this piece out of the way, we can spin its orientation at will. So let's do a 1-click counterclockwise and bring it back up. Bring it back up, right there. Now we need to undo the X part. Now we need to undo the Y part. This is a clockwise twist this time. And we will have spun this corner counterclockwise 1/5, and this corner clockwise 1/5. And again, these are the centers of a Starminx. But on the dual of this puzzle, they're the corners of an icosahedron. So the only other trick that you would possibly run into on this puzzle, so you solve all the corners, so which are the centers of this puzzle, and then solve all of the Pyramix crystal edges, and then solve the permutation of all of the centerpieces, and then solve the orientation of all of the centerpieces. The only problem that you're going to run into is that you could have a single centerpiece twisted. And the reason you can have a single centerpiece twisted is that if we twist that face, notice how it did a twist in this single centerpiece. And it did a 5-cycle of all of these other centers. But it didn't actually twist any of those centers, it just moved them. And I'll spare you the theory. This video is not the right place for the theory. But a 5-cycle can be solved. A 5-cycle is an even permutation, and you can solve a 5-cycle with 3 cycles. And that means that you could and the same goes for the 5-cycle of these Pyramix crystal edges. It's actually 2 5-cycles. And it's a 5-cycle of the Megamix corners. And you can solve all of these 5 cycles, including the Starminx points, with just regular 3 cycles. But that won't undo the twist of this center. So you can actually have a corner. You can have a single corner on this puzzle twisted, or a single center on the dodecahedral version of it twisted. And there is a really complicated and very difficult to understand 24-move sequence. It's actually 8 moves that you apply 3 times to twist a single center. And I'll probably show that in a different video, but that's really not, I found it via computer based on a hint by a gentleman named Doug Lee, or Douglas Lee. that's really not the intuitive solving that I want to teach in this video. So the intuitive way to fix, so imagine that you've solved all of the centers on this puzzle, and you've oriented them all, and you end with a single center twisted. The way to fix a single center twisted is actually to just do whatever twist is necessary on that piece to solve it. So imagine, you know, that you need to have the purple sticker pointing towards this purple face, but it's actually over there. So this would be the purple face. You need to twist this back around too. And then that's going to break all these other pieces that you've already solved, and you're going to have to live with that. You're going to have to recycle these pieces around and resolve them. So that's going to involve first fixing the Megaminx corners, or the Pyraminx crystal corners, and then fixing the Pyraminx crystal edges, and then recycling around these Starminx centers, or the Astrominx corners, and then refixing their orientations, and that will resolve a single center twisted issue. And unless you use my magic 24 move that I'm not going to show here, that's basically the only easy way to solve that particular problem. So it's not particularly glamorous, but that's what you're going to have to do, and I'll show how to fix sort of this center orientation parity, or this corner orientation parity, at some other time. So to recap, you want to solve these corners, and so you can solve them like they're a Megaminx corners. So let's take a look at, here's a 3 cycle for them. So we're actually looking at this pink corner up here, right? Okay, so pink corner, and then down. Okay, so then we need to replace the teal corner with the blue one, and then bring that back up, and then undo the Y part. And it looks like we broke a lot on this puzzle, but if everything else is all scrambled, then all we did was we cycled the blue, the teal, and the pink corners, and all the other corners stayed the same. So then that's how you solve the corners. And then you can do the 1-1 commutator to solve the Pyraminx crystal edges. And then you can use this 4-1 commutator, so that's the 4, and then here's the 1, that's the Y part, and then we're going to undo the X part, and then we're going to undo the Y part, and so then you can do the 3 cycle of the centers, and then you can fix the orientations of the centers, again with the same 1-1 setup, so the X setup, and then, you know, push this piece around, rotate it however you'd like, or however you need to, push it back up, then undo the X part, and then undo the Y part, which is right there. Okay, and then so orient all the centers, or all the corners, and then if you have a single one twisted, then you'll have to fix that twist parity by doing the necessary opposite twist, and then resolving the broken pieces. And then finally, after that, then you can go about solving these Starminx points. And so you can use a routine like this one, where you well, okay, I better not show that one. So you use a routine like this one, which, again, see my Starminx solving video if this is new. You can use a routine like that to cycle like the blue, the pink, the red piece, which I know the red and the pink are similar colors, so they're hard to see. And you can actually go about and solve this puzzle. Now, a super Starminx or a super Pentultimate, because of the center / corner twist parity, orientation parity problem, is quite a frustrating and challenging puzzle, and requires quite a few more moves if you run into the twist case. But that's really just the way it's going to have to be, because the intuitive way to twist this corner is so extraordinarily complicated to explain that it would really just fall down to memorization. And I'll probably show that in some other video. So good luck with this puzzle. It's significantly harder because of this orientation problem that I described. Significantly harder than the dodecahedral variant. But it's still a very fun puzzle, and I really encourage you to try it out.